Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise. Welcome to Stop Now. I'm Nate.
Hello, everyone. I'm JK.
Yes, it is good to be back, JK. Melissa, got to give a shout out to our friend Melissa, who is enjoying some well-deserved off time. How have you been, JK?
Yeah, I'm hanging in there, Nate. And we have returning special guest, Steve.
Yes.
And we wanted to drill more from his brain and get some interesting topic in regards to sex and God. So that's what we titled it for this week. Hopefully, here we go. Steve has joined us. Hi, Steve.
Hello, greetings, hail Satan.
What's going on, brother? Yes, I feel like, one of the things we talk about on Stop Now is finding connection points with people, even when we might have differences of opinions. And I think I've already found a connection point with you and me, Steve.
Well, like that's all we need.
Your background, your background and my background, they're very similar, because I feel like following this team behind me, I felt the weeping and the wailing and the gnashing of teeth being a Falcons fan. So we here, brother.
Yeah, kind of like you went to a gang fight and your gang didn't show up, huh?
or they started out good and then they just disappeared in the middle of the fight. I thought we was winning, but I guess not.
That's what happens when you don't possess that passion to win and succeed.
But how have you been since the last time we talked to you, man?
Oh, I'm good, man. Things can't be any better. My business is running good. I got a local comedy show I'm getting ready to kick off here in North LA County, where I'll be doing presenting really interesting comedians with different perspectives, totally uncensored, kind of like a town hall community satanic comedy show. So yeah, everything is looking up.
I was gonna say that's a hell of a tagline. No pun intended. Just but when we talk about what JK just mentioned off the top, man, God and sex, those are two very evocative titles and two very evocative issues that people talk about these days. So what's kind of the first thing that comes to your mind when we talking about this thing, man, God and sex?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, because those two things anywhere being interconnected, the first thing comes to my mind is God and sex should be separated, just like politics and God. There should be a distinct and specific separation,
like church and state,
a cleaving of each other. And it's the same way it should be because no entity, no deity should have any influence on your sex life or your sexual orientation as that matters. So yeah, those things should be totally different. And as you can see, and everyone else can see who's been living on Earth for any substantial period of time, that the inherent overwhelming force of our sexual nature as human beings cannot be harnessed by any religion.
Right. And you see that it's like a lot of times it's the ones who would like to dictate people's sexuality to them. A lot of times we find those folks are the ones that end up getting caught slipping. Like right now, I got the news on in the background, and you can see like people in Washington that have been anti-LGBTQ or anti-sex work, and those are the ones getting caught up, messing with kids and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. We won't mention Mike Pence and his sexual orientation, and we won't mention Getz in Florida. I mean, this thing here with him is going to get so deep because it involves basically child sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And paying of funds, and we don't know where those funds come from. Are those contributions? Are those taxpayer dollars? I mean, it's going to take a minute to get to the bottom of this investigation, but I think that it will shine a very bright light on politicians and sex. And as you know, politicians and sex goes all the way back to the founding of this nation with Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. There was a whole lot of little half white and half black Obamas running around Monticello, the plantation, just because of that sex drive. There had to be something there, you know.
That's why there's so many black Jeffersons and Jacksons and Washingtons, you know, to this day.
Sorry, Miss Jackson, I'm sorry. But I still got your daughter pregnant.
Like that's a whole like that's the sequel to Hamilton. Like that's the stories they didn't say in Hamilton.
Right.
But when you talk about politics, because I feel like, you know, even as a person of faith, I agree with you in the fact that there should be that separation between church and state. And no matter what religion you are, that shouldn't determine public policy. And in particular, when you look at, not to get too political with it, Steve, but when you look at where the Republican Party is now and how that has been so linked with evangelical Christians, and they're using that connection to hurt people through the law. You know, as somebody who has no time for religion, like what do you think about when you see just the way that religion and politics have commingled, have shared the same bed for so long in this country's history?
Well, let me tell you, religion is just another useful tool for the politicians, just like the military, law enforcement, religion. I mean, come on. The evangelical right has wrapped themselves in all three of these things. And this happened when George W. stood on that pile of rubble, 9/11, and started screaming, "Oh yeah, you're gonna hear us, and we're gonna get your ass, and look at all my firefighters and military." And sex is in there. They do the same thing to try to tell gay people, LGBTQ plus community, how to live their lives as it relates to sex. Well, let me tell you, your God don't have shit to do with that. That's all in a person's chemical makeup, in their brain, in their head, what they desire, what they lust for. And as you can see, people lust for all kinds of different things. I'm talking goats, chickens, you know. So, hey, it's a powerful force. Look at us. We just keep multiplying. The population on the earth, which I think is expeditiously becoming overwhelming to sustain this earth, but you know, we're not gonna stop fucking.
Well, you know, hold on there. Like, we have your exclusive friend, Jason. And I was thinking, like, should I admit him? Or is he going to be well today to talk? And then, like, okay, fine. He's going to be the host in the future. And I just don't want to miss that opportunity. Welcome, Jason. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm feeling a little under the weather today, but I am proud to say, and I'm saying this slowly because I'm trying to pull it out, I am so proud to say that I am now in the upper tier of the American caste system because I have the passport.
Got your freedom papers.
Which also means that today I'm feeling like shit, but you know what? I'm glad to feel like shit. That means that I'm protected from COVID. And unlike yesterday, I'm going to get on what Steve said a second ago, but I have to say, you know that saying, this is why we can't have nice things. I waited in line. I have asthma. So I got in a few days earlier than everyone else to get the vaccine because of my asthma. You think to yourself, you know, there can't be a possible benefit to having asthma. You know what it is? During a respiratory pandemic, you're good. But then standing in line yesterday, it was like 2.5 hours to get in to get the vaccine because there was such a long line. And people are complaining and like, oh, it's 2.5, oh, it's 2 hours. Oh, it's 2 hours. How long is it? It's like, shut up. You're getting the vaccine. You're getting it before everybody else. Just shut up. Yeah, be grateful. Show some gratitude that people worked really hard to develop this thing so we won't die if we get COVID. You know, you waited for a year of inconvenience in washing your hands and mask wearing. You got 2 more hours. This is why we can't have nice things. And also, to go off of what Steve was saying about sexuality, you know the actor Armie Hammer?
Yeah.
Who was in Call Me by Your Name? he had like some ex-girlfriends come out to talk about one of his fetishes, which was cannibalism. And because he's like, I want to eat you, I want to cook your ribs. Well, that sounds a lot like Jesus hanging out with his bros and saying like, hey, guess what, guys? See this wine? It's my blood. And see this bread? It's my body. Eat up. So you know what? I have to say? Whether it's Arnie Hammer or whether it's someone who feels a little bit of an allure and a romantic inclination towards our hoofed friends, don't kink shame. Or Jesus, don't kink shame.
Oh man! Well, first of all, yeah, congratulations on getting vaccinated, brother. Because I think that again, that is something that hopefully in the coming weeks and months, we will see more and more individuals becoming vaccinated. Because you know, it's not a black thing or a white thing or a religious thing or a non-religious thing. Like it's a health thing. And so everybody does need to, when it's your time, go ahead and get that vaccination.
You know what? One thing though, speaking of it being a black thing, if we look at the ratios of people dying, which group of people is dying in much greater numbers?
Us.
Yeah, and they
black,
talk
brown,
and there's all this talk. Well, I don't know about reparations. If you're black, you should just get to the head of the line. Honestly. It's a significantly higher risk of dying. So
well, here's the thing about that, and Steve, I think we might be on the same wavelength on this, because when the vaccine first came out, I was of two minds about it. Where on the one hand, I was like, yeah, like we should go first because we're the ones most affected by this due to underlying conditions in America. But on the other hand, I was like, I need to wait to see, like I need to see some white folks get this first because we remember Tuskegee.
Yeah,
we remember some of these other things in the nation's history. So I was conflicted about that.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about, we all remember Tuskegee, and I'm more concerned about all the shit, the unimaginable bullshit that we don't know about. You know, down there in the South, below the Mason-Dixie line, where all the, I'm sure they probably had doctors from all over the world coming to experiment on black people. You imagine some of the torturous, barbaric trials that they tried on us, you know. I mean, as far even as medical procedures, even as early pharmaceuticals, you know, like here, if you eat 2 pounds of bear shit, it cures cancer, you know, stuff like that. But then on the other hand, I was thinking, okay, they got this vaccine in, as Trump might say, warp time. And but then I started thinking about some of our institutions, like the Food and Drug Administration, people who are highly trained. So some people might call them, you know, the deep state. But I have a deep appreciation for the people in the deep state, people who have been at the FDA maybe a whole entire career, and people like Dr. Fauci, who dedicated their lives to public service when they probably could have made more money. And their job, they're you know, saddled with getting this shit right to keep people from dying.
Right.
You know, that's a pretty big motivation. And then on the other hand, with the pharmaceutical industries, they know they're going to get paid by the richest nation on earth to get this money machine turned back on, so everybody can get their ass back to work. The peasants can be happy. All of that shit. So yeah, it was a lot of concerns, but I thought, you know, my thoughts went to the FDA. I'm like, okay, they ain't gonna give us no bullshit. And for one, they definitely ain't gonna give black people no bullshit. So I'm like, okay, shit, I already got my first shot.
Yeah, I was talking with JK before the show. I've been fully vaccinated. Got me some of that Moderna drip, so I'm good to go. But I think that, you know, kind of tying this back in, because I do think there's when we talk about sex, when we talk about God, when we talk about American life, Jason, there is something that I guess it might have always been there, but it seems, and Steve brought up that T word, it seems over the last 4 or 5 years, the acceleration of misinformation, of people choosing to be willfully ignorant. That seems like maybe it's something that was always here, but it feels different now.
Just to rewind on that, like Steve, correct me if I'm wrong. We don't have to redo this for Jason from the beginning, right? So I'm wearing the mask, and you all know that. Like many people think that as a devil or something. We had a guest last week, Barbara, and Nate can talk to that. It was a funny story, and they feel offended by looking at that mask, and they don't want that in their show as such. And you are kind of representing the devil, right? So I'm not going to be your advocate.
I'm a Satanist. I am a satanic humanist.
So you want to be a humanist, but I want to be on the devil side. And
okay, well, come on, I got room for you too.
So I'm asking you this question, right? As you mentioned, right, the sex and the God and politics has to be separate. But why are you saying that? Because I see that like it's a power hungry thing. Every religion or God, it's like superpower, right? Politician wants that superpower. That is why like they want everything to be together, right? And you don't get that. That is the reason like you are saying like it has to be separate. But people who are hungry for more power, they want those things. Because politics, and even we interviewed Daryl Ray, he is famous for his like the God virus and the sex and God, right? So that is where like we got this title, saying that like we will explore on this. So I'll just keep short, because you cannot separate these things unless you have control on the sexuality of the humans through God. You are not going to be politically correct in having the people of your country under your control. That's how I see it. So what is wrong in that?
Of course. And you know what's wrong with that? What does, they want to harness, they want to put everything under the umbrella of their power. What does absolute power do?
Corrupts absolutely.
Thank you. That was a long ass delay in that answer, but thank you.
As a dramatic pause for the viewers.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Maybe give people time to think about it. But yeah, so when they incorporate religion into that power grab, now they've got your mind. Why the hell would you give up the freedom of thought and the freedom of critical thinking? Why would you give someone else that power? You might as well be a damn zombie.
Yeah. So you are saying that like, yeah, I mean, to that point, right, Nate, just recollect that, right? Even people who have been abused, sexually abused from the childhood, right? You said like child sex trafficking, but they say that like it's not child sex trafficking, it is a rape. So child cannot be like consented to have sex. So it is basically a rape. And even those people, right, from that lady, like she's old enough, and she said so many horrible stories about his grandfather, his relatives, pastors abusing her from the childhood and doing the incest and all those things. Yeah. But she still believes in God.
Yeah, and that's part of the mental illness of religion. It's part of that cognitive dissonance that people can't let go. It's like you're betraying your relatives when actually you're not. You're doing your relatives a damn favor by getting out from under that religion that was beat into them.
And that was one of the questions I asked her that was like I asked her that question point blank on the episode, because even as a person of faith, that level of betrayal, like that has to shake somebody. At least in my opinion, that has to shake somebody to the core. And, her answer was that, she had unyielding faith in God. And so like again, Jason, I don't know what your perspective on this would be, because I do feel like there is something in survivors where like you survived whatever way you can survive. And maybe that's the way that she was able to get through that. But to Steve's point about kind of the manipulation and the brainwashing that can occur with religion, like it's all tied up in there.
Yeah. Well, and that's that Stockholm process too, where people think they have no place else to go, so they kind of bend to the will of their captor. It's the Stockholm syndrome part of it. But yeah, it gets deep, and we can talk about sex in the Black church whenever y'all get ready to. Because that's a fucking 4-hour show.
That's the Snyder cut right there.
Who was the bishop who was having sex with? Was his name Eddie Long?
Eddie Long.
Bishop Eddie Long out of Atlanta, where the Falcons are. We're gonna have to check Atlanta.
Between Eddie Long, Falcons, Brian Kemp, there's a lot going on right now.
Oh man, Atlanta child murders, all kind of shit, hangings, lynchings. What's up? I thought Florida. Y'all too close to Florida. That's what it is.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Proximity.
Well, go ahead, Jason.
I was gonna say, it's demonstrable that it's not necessarily demonstrable of it, but it seems rather clear that looking at the fact that the concept of God and religion is so customizable, and there's so many versions of it, and the versions of religion looking so similar to the culture and representing so seemingly representing the interests of the immediate clergy and the immediacy, it does speak to the fact that religion is probably a human-made instrument. Mm-hmm. And the aspect of control was brought up, but I think that we also have to look at human freedom as well, and people can be spiritual and have the concept of God without being in the midst of a religious institution. And maybe some of that is from the socialization where God is the pantheistic idea of God is everywhere and I'm connected with everything, which carries a constellation of issues that's different than being in a rather authoritarian structured institution. But when it comes down to it, the target that we have to look at is these strict institutional religions. Mm-hmm. And what was said earlier about control, the greatest way you can control someone is to control their concept of sex and gender, and patriarchy is so, and I don't want to go down this fourth wave feminist route and blame everything on the patriarchy, but patriarchy is so firmly ensconced within these structures that if you happen to be a woman, I wouldn't recommend being in any of these institutions because you don't have the same full eligibility for full social and institutional membership. Mm. And if you're gay and you don't have the full availability for being fully eligible for the total membership package, it's probably not the place for you. If you're Black, same thing, it's probably not the place for you. And the good thing is, while against a lot of inherent socialization and programming where you're told that if you doubt you're committing a sin, or you're told that if you leave you're going to embarrass your family, you have to work hard to escape, but there are other communities for you, and escape is possible. For example, looking at it, I understand why women stay within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a woman will never be the president of the church. Mm-hmm. And for some people, if that's your thing, and you think that women are not as equal to men, or it's equality, but women have a different place. Okay, maybe, but it's not necessarily a good place, a healthy place for women. If you're in an institution that says that wives must submit themselves to their husbands. And I have a friend who occasionally comes to my secular humanist meetings on Zoom. He's an evangelical Christian, and that's his perspective, and how he justifies it is, well, in a dispute, in a familial dispute, there has to be a final say. And as the Bible says, it's the husband. And my thought is that doesn't seem like a fair, or there's no equity in that relationship. There's no equity. And you should never be in a relationship where there's not fairness and equity. It damages you. It wears you down over time. If it wears you down to the point that you're coming from a starting place where you don't have a say in the final say, then it's something that you should not be involved in. It's something you shouldn't be involved in. Healthy relationships are where we should go. And as was discussed about the problems inherent in institutional religions, like Bishop Eddie Long's church to the Catholic Church, et cetera. I like numbers. I have an advanced degree in the social sciences, so I like looking at these big social trends, and I like numbers. And Gallup has been researching religious attendance and membership for decades. And in 1999, 70% of Americans were members of a church. It didn't say that they went to church every Sunday or even once a month, but they were members of a church. And for the first time since Gallup, for decades and decades of Gallup, taking surveys of, are you a member of a church? Are you a member of a church? 47% of Americans surveyed are members of a church. And I want to tie this into something else. And if you guys, I'm sure that, and I know Steve has read this. And if you guys haven't read this, I recommend that you do. And if everyone watching this hasn't read this, I recommend that you do. So for my humanist group last Sunday, we've been trying to do more than be, we have racial diversity in our group, but largely it's a majority white community, majority white organization. And you have a lot of moderate whites doing performative activism, click, hashtag divism, whatever, putting a little border on their Facebook profile. And it's just, oh, look, we're woke because we did a social justice book club. And there's not a lot of listening that takes place where you listen to the people of color or the LGBT people in the community, and you don't dive in sincerely to connect and to learn, and to not just learn, but to be there as an ally, not just someone who's saying, look at me, I have great gravitas because an Asian guy or an Asian lady attended our meeting, so we're good with Asian people. No, we're going really deep into social justice, and we're having a lot of our meetings focusing on listening and learning and figuring out how we can be more than of that great white savior mindset. And we're embracing stories. We're embracing stories because, as I've said time and again in these meetings, that we're all little pixels in the greater portrait of all of humanity, and the portrait is incomplete without all of our stories together. And as such, for this last Sunday, we had a meeting, and honestly, all these social justice issues, whether it's racial equality, gender parity, et cetera, they all go back to economic justice. Steve talks a lot about this, about education of the Black community, real estate, and finance, et cetera, et cetera. It all goes back to economic justice. And so we looked at one of the most important pieces of American literature on the commemoration of the day that he was assassinated, which was April 4th. And if you guys haven't read Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail, you absolutely should. You absolutely should. And in it, he says, we are all Americans. This is an American issue. So these claims that this is about outside agitators, there can't be an outside agitator if this is an American issue and it's Americans who are fighting for this. But to tie this back to the religion side, what Dr. King said in Letter from a Birmingham Jail is that he assumed, he said he was greatly disappointed because he assumed when he would come to town that preachers, priests, and rabbis would be the first person to rally to his defense and help him, and they ignored him. And he wrote in the letter from a Birmingham jail that these religious institutions, the clergy of these religious institutions are hiding behind the anesthetization of stained glass windows. And if these preachers and priests and rabbis, and also I'll add imams and pundits, etc., don't work for economic justice and don't work for equity and don't work for racial justice and justice across the board, what's going to happen is he feared that churches and synagogues would just become irrelevant social clubs, irrelevant and empty social clubs, and looking at where church membership has gone, which of course the Black church has served to unite people and to carry a lot of the burden for the movement. But what we're seeing, and we're seeing groups like Black non-believers where this is growing the Black community and Hispanic freethinkers of America, where this is growing in the Hispanic community and for white churches across the US, we see that Dr. King wasn't just a luminary and a hero, but he was also a prophet. Because we see through Gallup, 1999, when 70% of Americans were church members, 47%. And the thing is that and I'm going to tie this to the sex aspect as well. It's that religion is a product of human beings. Religious institutions have a critical need to serve people and the needs of people. And there's something that if you tie yourself back, and I say this, and you can, and I hope other people use this statement as well, whether it's homophobia, whether it's racism, whether it's misogyny, a lot of people tie it to the Bible or the Quran or the Torah. And things like, well, you can't have two crops of different types in the same field. You can't have two crops. You can't wear clothes woven of two fabrics. So two people of different races can't get married and have kids because that's an abomination. And with this, whether it's racism, whether it's anti-miscegenation thought, whether it's homophobia rooted in antiquity remains antiquated homophobia. Racism rooted in antiquity remains antiquated racism. And the thing, and this is the most insulting thing, and you could say, well, the church and the Catholics will say this, and the Catholics ride on this, that the church moves slower than society because it preserves tradition because society can change. Well, I think that's a terrible excuse, because that's a huge insult to the fact that there's one word that can sum up something glorious and amazing that crosses racial lines, crosses class lines, crosses sex and gender lines. And it's learning. It's learning. We have this amazing capacity to learn. And if you put your concepts of sex and gender rooted thousands of years ago, that was before the social sciences. And you have really smart people, honest people, devoted to truth, devoted to expanding knowledge, who have come up with these ideas rooted not in how we hope human beings act and should act, but how human beings actually are. And looking at this, looking at what Dr. King said, that if churches don't serve people and don't serve the needs of people, because a lot, like you could say it was this letter about racial justice where he was saying things like, the biggest problem isn't white bigots, but white moderates, because white moderates are far more frustrating than white bigots, because you know where white bigots stand. But white moderates will come and they'll do their social justice book club and say, hey, we're woke, we're going to march. But that's as far as it goes. And it can be more frustrating because they provide the moral oxygen for all this crap. And we have to use what we've learned and continue to learn and take how human beings actually are into the equation, and not just root ourselves in the past, because in the past, women didn't have a say. In the past, we had racial-based chattel slavery. and all this ties to these old outdated notions. And
well, not only that, but I feel like because you know, and I'll give a story from my own life, guys. When you talk about the way the church has addressed some of these issues, like there was a time where I would not have been classified as the most loving or accepting or open to somebody that was a different sexuality or had a different orientation than I did. But around 15, 16, I'm like, the the Cliff Notes version of this book that I say that I believe in, it's not about this rule or this regulation. Like, to me, it was love your neighbor as yourself. Like, we all in this together. Like the old West Coast Rap All Stars video from back in the day. Steve, we all in the same gang. No matter what color we wearing, we all in the same gang. And so I feel like when we look at this idea of using this book as a cudgel, I guess would be a good word for it, to kind of batter people and ideas and ideals that the church doesn't believe in. I think that's kind of a breaking point for a lot of people of faith, where it's like, I can't believe in a God that doesn't have love for this person or that person. And so I think that, like, the church is having its own, no pun intended, come to Jesus moment, where there's a lot of people, especially when you look at those evangelical Christians who rode for 4 years for somebody that's talked about division and hate and things of that nature. Like, the church has to modernize or it's going to wither on the vine, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. And you know what? If the church can't serve the needs of people, and we have groups that are serving the needs of people, then the church can just wither and fade away. Because we don't have there is no use for something that doesn't serve the needs of people with what we know about people. Yeah. It's unrealistic. And also, maybe, just maybe, it's unrealistic. Like, people say, well, the church will move with the time, otherwise otherwise, like you said, it'll wither on the vine. But maybe it's unrealistic to expect an institution that's well over a millennia old to maintain itself through changing time. Maybe it's more reasonable to expect it to just evaporate and be replaced by another institution.
And well, then that goes to the idea real quick, Steve. For me, the church is not the building. The church is not even the institution. The church is the people. And so where I look at it, it's like, what are the people doing, and who are the people following? And if the people aren't following the right roadmap, then maybe the people need to go in a different direction that's not stuck in this old antiquated way.
Well, Jason brought up something real important. He boiled it down to, after economics, that education. Well, that education, the church and that magical book of bullshit that they have is a barrier and a resistance zone to keep people from learning and being educated and using all of this knowledge that we've have acquired over centuries since the Bible has been written. I mean, that knowledge goes away by just a couple magical words. But the Bible says, who gives a fuck? I mean, not to disrespect religion, but I'm just saying it's deferring our future human development because there's so many barriers, and it's like you stated so eloquently, used as a cudgel to knock the shit out of people when they get out of line. Man, it's just so detrimental. The whole aspects of religion, sex, humanity, compassion, love, and then you got the Bible that's Leviticus. Oh, don't wear polyester and cotton. It'll give you diarrhea. Some shit like that. I mean, come on. We gotta move on, man. I'm telling you, somebody's gonna show up to this fucking planet one day from somewhere else, and they're gonna look at us like we're fucking idiots.
Or what's going to happen is it's going to be Andy Kaufman emerging from a spaceship saying, hey, I've been here for thousands of years and I created this prank and you guys are still doing it. But you know, that's honestly why. Oh,
guys,
JK?
yeah, guys, we are idiots, no doubt about that, right? And how stupid we can be interpreted with this, because I have this notion. I don't know how that got messed up back there in the Indian subcontinent as well. Because if you notice it, like we had culturally, it was an open and free thinking kind of thing. We never had this concept of morality or someone giving us in a book or preacher or those kind of things. Because if you notice that, like even with the structures like the temples, there were statues, and we are famous for Kama Sutra, right? So you guys know that, right? And we worship uh, women and also the sexuality, and we never had the problem. But how did it turn into, based on different other religions, conquest? So I'm still having that struggle, like why are we stuck in this, right? So in terms of streamlining the argument for their side, right? So I'm just not defending them, but to say that if you are not being controlled and streamlined, you will go wild and you will have that animal instinct, and you can go fucking around people, right? So that is not good. That is the reason, like they justify that, like, oh, this is sin, this is blah blah blah. And what you have to say about those things?
Yeah, well, what is Shiva represented by in a temple? Speaking of sex, what is Shiva represented by in a temple? What is the statue of Shiva that you usually see in front of a shrine, in a shrine to Shiva? A linga.
Yeah, that is a controversial thing, right? They say all kind of stories, right? I don't
Do you
believe
guys?
all those nonsense, but then they say that like it is a, uh, penis worship kind of thing, right? The
Yeah,
structure of the
like
penis. That's what
the
they say
like
that.
like for the god Shiva, in front of shrines to Shiva, like Ganesh, there might be like an ox, but in front of Shiva, you have a phallus. You have a big you have a big black dildo with Shiva's image on both sides. It's called a linga. Am I wrong, JK?
Uh, no, I don't disagree on those things, right? Because there has been a different kind of stories, like saying that like why they don't have the image of Shiva, like to be like taken over by Brahma. See, these are stories, right? It doesn't gives us any kind of even with the people over there, right? They don't mind, right? You do whatever you want. That's why, like they say, like even if you believe in Jesus or Allah or worship whatever, a stone or a tree, we don't care. Everybody is like in their own path. So there was like no structure at all, right? I don't have that kind of problem over there. But now with the modern society, like trying to have that Hindu nationalism kind of thing, having a fake identity. Hinduism is not a religion as such, right? It was like propagated by the outsiders who try to invade and capture and group us together. So my problem is not with the religion or God. In terms of sexuality, right? What went wrong? It is a part of evolution. It is in our genes. That is what, like even Daryl Ray was mentioning in his book in the talk shows and all. He says like it's part of our gene, and the viruses keep spreading, and it is keeping us intact by having those religious god virus mentality. So it is not in our control, right? When it is not in our control, just like you guys went ahead and had the vaccine to get rid of the COVID, right? And something like that, is there a magic bullet for getting us cured with the god thing?
Well, I think this is bigger than even the religion part of the discussion, because I think a lot of that, and Jason and Steve, you can speak on it too. I think it goes to misogyny, right? And misogyny can exist within or without of a religious context. And wherever you got dudes, you'll find some misogyny. It's just been that way since the beginning of time, and I don't think you fix a lot of this sex stuff until you kind of address the root issue, which is like, for a lot of the history of this world, people have treated women very poorly, and they continue to do so.
That almost sounds like a commercial for misogyny, like old-timey like folk violin playing, like, here with men, we have a firm tradition. Wherever you find dudes, you have misogyny.
Yeah.
Enjoy a nice cold Budweiser with some old-time misogyny.
It's like the Masters, a tradition unlike any other.
Bitch, go get me
Right.
Misogyny.
Tastes great, and it's less filling.
But
Jason, on that note, like I was expecting another volunteer, like his name is Shiva, right? He said like he will join and he will defend the Hinduism kind of thing. I'm not, because you know that like I'm an atheist, right? So
yeah, well,
they just say that, like even with Shiva, right? They say they worship him. They call it as I don't know whether I'm saying it right. They say like Ardhanarishri, something like. So he is made up of half of his wife, right? Both represents like half male and half female.
Because you can look at because there's something that is deeply spiritual and sacred for Hindus, but for everyone else, it's just seen as sort of a trite little art piece to say that you like a little Eastern art and artifact. And it's the cosmic dance of Shiva, and where Shiva is standing on the back of a dwarf with his arms, with the fire ring around. You've seen that, where his one leg is up. If you look at it, Shiva has some androgynous features like bigger hips and sort of a feminine face. So you have the feminine that's incorporated in there. But let's not forget also, because we're talking a little bit about Hinduism and Indian culture, let's not forget about misogyny. You guys familiar with sati?
Please explain.
Bride burning.
Yeah. See, that is kind of
not as common now. It's banned, but
not bribery, right? So it is like the way of life they entangled, right? Even now, still it exists, right? It's like divorce rate is the lowest, right? If you compare it like with the population, and it is picking up there, but still it is like they are matching people. There is no concept of love there, right? It's like they arrange the marriage and they use the astrological chart, and within the caste system you have to get married. It still exists, so you can't get out of that. So when that is the case, if you are married, like your souls are attached to it, like you are for life. So that is how their tradition was. That is why like they were justifying, and they were doing a child marriage, right? People were getting once you attain the puberty, like women has to be treated separately and they have to get married, and they have to be together with the husband. And when the husband dies, women were not allowed 100 years before, like they were not allowed to remarry, and obviously they are found as a useless object in home. So they attached it, like they have to go along with the husband's funeral, and they have to jump in that. Like that's basically what sati is, like what Jason referring. So it's like women doesn't had like a own life kind of thing. That was propagated by, we have a division, right? The Aryan outsiders who did that, but the Dravidians, like from where I come from, the south side, they had a rich culture, and they are basically a nature worshipper. They never believed in God. They never did anything. But all that, like later on, it was manipulated, and whoever comes first to the Western world and say that like, oh, we are all Hindus, they started believing that like we are Hindus, but we are not. That is the trouble here. Like, how do I even make the whole world understand like there is no concept called Hinduism back then. It was never there. Even now, if you go, people were good, and largely they all are good. They don't mind. Like, you do whatever you want, but don't uh, interfere in my personal the family traditions. All right. Every family will have their own god. That is how, like, I see that. It's perfectly fine, right? It's like, if you have your own god, you do whatever in your personal thing, you do masturbate. What it has to do with anybody else, right? It has nothing to do with anybody else. When you interact with the other person and you fall out, then the problem comes in, right?
Yeah. Just for a little bit of levity, considering that the old senile racist Prince Philip died yesterday at 99, and considering that
do you show no mercy, Jason? No mercy at all.
Think about it. You know,
man, I'm Satan. You making Satan feel bad.
No. I was going to say, considering, because old people at 99 start gaining senility and they start grunting a little bit.
Yeah, that's where the venules start to shrink.
So I was going to say, considering that Philip Mountbatten, because I don't recognize monarchy, it's an artificial construct that elevates people. Calling someone your Royal Highness is disgusting. It's disgusting. You're no better than me just because your parents fucked their cousins and they all had money, and you're keeping it in the pants, and you either keep it in the pants or keep it in the family with, that's two things real quick. That's one thing we think about when we think of the abjectly rich and the abjectly poor, is we think about incest, and like the abjectly rich and the abjectly poor, they all have lots of cars. Usually the abjectly poor have cars that don't run on the lawn, but they have lots of cars. The abjectly rich have lots of cars. The abjectly rich and the abjectly poor all have legacy names too, of Junior and the Third. But considering that that old Philip Mountbatten, a senile old racist, died at 99, and considering that DMX died on the same day at 50, you know what the word of the day is?
What?
Where my dogs at?
I think that like we found the unifier in this universe. It's not religion, it's not God, it's DMX.
Right. Up in here.
I guess real quick, because we're running a little short on time, but before we get out of here, getting back to the original thesis statement, and we can start with Steve and then we can go to Jason. When we look at God, when we look at sex, when we look at America, because I think that's like the overwhelming kind of banner over all of these issues. It's just America. And something that I've really enjoyed watching, and this is not a plug because Mickey Mouse doesn't need my money, but something I've enjoyed watching lately is The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is kind of a sequel to Captain America from the movies. And a lot of this show is talking about what does America mean, specifically to Black people and poor people and people from other countries, and the LGBTQ community and people that don't fit that poster of classic America that Americans sometimes like to present. So when we talk about God, when we talk about sexuality, Steve, like, what do you think the solution to all of this is, if we can have a solution in a 1-hour talk show?
Woo! let me give it to you raw. The solution would be honesty. But then being honest, could ruin a whole lot of relationships. But if everyone was just honest with their likes, their things they lust for, that way, like they say, first thing you need to do when you have a problem is admit you have a problem. If you like sex with goats, admit to yourself that you like sex with goats, and either do something about it, have your own private goats where you ain't messing with nobody else's goats. You know, handle your, you know, don't rape children. You know, as long as you're not doing nothing against the law, no one's getting injured, nobody's limbs are being detached, then, you know, I say let people live free. I'm a descendant of a slave in America, man. I want everybody to be just as free as they can, but don't hurt anybody.
I see, and again, I think that like there's something to, you know, if you like it, I love it, man. Like as long as it's not hurting people, man. Like I think there is something to minding your business that America hasn't quite gotten to yet. What about you, Jason? When we talk about like this big topic that can feel overwhelming for a lot of people, you know, is it something that could be solved, but like Steve was saying, by that honesty?
Yeah, before Jason, you put your thought, like I just want to remind that like how America has treated like the Indian gurus as well. Like he's famous for, right? You all know him, Osho. He was called as Bhagwan Rajneesh in 80s, right? And the Wild Wild West, Wild Wild Country in the Netflix series might remind that like how he was handled and abused by the justice system just because like he was in favor of the sex and the Christian denomination was not favorable on that, and he was forced to accept the crimes and deport himself back. So it's not something going to go away, right? It's like even Steve was mentioning, like if you mind your own thing and have a community and be free, they don't let you prosper. That's not going to, because we are not living in an island. Even if you are in an island, they will come and invade you, right? So that's going to always going to haunt us.
Well, I think like you're bringing up a good point, JK, but I think, and it's funny that we talked about vaccinations so much this week, like everybody in America is not going to get vaccinated. Like we know that, just statistically speaking, everybody's not going to get the shot. But I think if you have enough people who are vaccinated, that makes everything safer. And I think when we're talking about like people minding their damn business, if you have enough people that are not trying to infringe on people's rights, I think that helps. Like it might not solve the problem, but I do think it helps if we can mitigate the damage from whether it's religion or the government or corporations who would kind of try to step over those boundaries.
Jason, your thoughts on that?
Jason, yeah.
I don't think it's just education, because education swings in a lot of ways. For example, the one thing that unites almost all people, unless you're a sociopath, is you expect fairness and reciprocity. And a lot of education can actually make you think that those who are not the ones exploiting you are the ones who are your greatest enemy. For example, you have even middle-class Americans who are afraid of these waves of people coming up across the southern border, and they're going to come and just run roughshod and destroy everything here, when there's actually a negative net migration instead of a positive net migration. And you have this idea that they're being vigilant against this unseen enemy which is going to be infiltrating us. And that doesn't come from not being educated in a particular way. For example, in the southern states, I was a substitute teacher for several months in a Texas public school. Texas, they don't have public, they have a Texas independent school district. And the Civil War wasn't fought over slavery there, it was fought over states' rights.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where education can take you. I think humility is an important thing that can help us get closer to a state of equity and equality. Humility is a big one. Maintaining and cultivating a sense of reciprocity and cultivating a sense of sensitivity towards the feelings of others and the needs of others. And also cultivating curiosity and discernment, because one thing that, you know, we're looking down on a certain group of people for their interest in things like QAnon, but we're also not looking at the fact that the public education system has failed these people, because they're finally figuring out how stacked the deck actually is, and they're gaining a lot of new information, and a lot of it is incorrect information, and they're developing these wild conjectures and hypotheses based upon it. And it's, if you look at what the QAnon people are saying about these deep state conspiracies, where it's almost like someone with a big chalkboard or press board with a bunch of string that's connecting photos, they're not dumb. They just haven't been taught, they have not experienced enough training in critical thought. Because it's just like, on the one hand, you say that the government is engaging in this massive conspiracy which is going to destroy everything, but on the other hand, you're saying the government is totally inept. Which one is it? It just doesn't make sense.
No.
Well, I think honestly, it would take time to implement this, but policies based on actual evidence, and also teaching sensitivity, teaching, and that's the sensitivity of others' feelings, and not saying that you have to necessarily accommodate everyone's feelings, but figuring out where someone is coming from, a sensitivity to not only understanding, but trying to understand, cultivating curiosity, maintaining and cultivating a deeper expectation of fairness and reciprocity, and cultivating discernment. Because I was just chatting with someone today and about these particular issues, and I had to bring up the fact that the wealthiest family in America, you talking about, immigration, and also bringing up things like unionization, and the fact of the matter is the wealthiest family in America is the Waltons. And how do they make their money? They made their money off of government subsidies. Not only government subsidies in terms of land and taxes, but also government subsidized healthcare for their employees. And so we have an expectation of fairness that's accurate, that's useful to have, and it's great to have, and it's causing people to be upset, and reasonably so, but they're upset at the wrong people.
Yes. Yep.
They're upset at the wrong people. And so like Steve has mentioned before, and this is another way to put it, we have to rephrase things. So like when reparations, the subject of reparations has been brought up, Steve has said something absolutely wonderful, and this is the great way to phrase it. It's not reparations, it's back pay. It's back pay.
Yep.
And with that, we frame it in a way that it acknowledges the historical disparities, and it acknowledges the fact that we're expecting fairness, because what is the common response to the discussion on reparations? It's, well, why should we pay all these people? Why should we just throw cash at these people? I'm not getting cash. My ancestors didn't enslave anyone. And the thing is that having that sensitivity.
We even just saw that this past year with the unemployment benefits. With the, folks are getting mad at people that are getting extra aid, like why does he get an extra $500 just for staying at home? And it's like that lack of empathy, I think, is something that it needs to be fixed, but it's a hard fix, I think.
Yeah.
I think
see how quickly they had the peasants fighting over the crumbs. That's what that, and then pitting us against each other. Instead of just having the human decency of knowing that people need to eat and need shelter.
Need to keep the lights on.
And I don't think it's from a lack of empathy at all. I think it's an excessive amount of empathy, and this empathy directed towards your own group, because right then and there, it's not just me, but other people like me were being taken advantage of, and I feel for all of us who are being taken advantage of. And it's and you don't and you know, here comes Marxism 101. But you like Steve is talking about the peasants fighting over the crumbs. You know, one thing that I find perverse and horrid is that Amazon employees just this last week voted against their own interest to not have collective bargaining. And what that does, it's not just for Amazon employees. If Amazon employees could have stood up to the corporation, it would have meant other corporations would have had to actually given their employees their due, and it would have set a standard. But this sets us all back, because unionized employees make 25% more than non-unionized employees. And that's not just in benefits, that's in take-home pay. And you have a relative sense of job security, because, quite frankly, when you're not in a union, if you're a worker, you don't have a lot of power. You sign these arbitration agreements where you can't go to court if something goes awry. Just the condition of employment is signing an arbitration agreement where the company basically says, well, we're going to take care of this in-house instead of being accountable publicly, criminally. You need people to, we have to work together, and we have to seek to understand each other, and that we're not all coming from the same place, but in a lot of ways we are. I'll just say it for Nate's benefit, that by the grace of God, you know.
Amen and amen.
I got to give you a hell Satan on that one.
But yeah, fellas, we got to wrap up, because I think we could literally be here another hour talking about all of these things, because it's all interconnected and they all kind of tie into each other. But really quick, you know, if you got social media or anything, any information out there that you'd like to promote, go ahead and do that for the good people out there. Steve?
Hey, Instagram at Steve Hill Comic. That's it. That's where you can find me doing my damage.
At Steve Hill Comic. And Jason?
Get involved, even if you live far away, with the Humanist Association of San Diego. Our primary social media front right now is meetup.com/Humanist Association. JK attends our meetings. Steve attends our meetings from time to time. It's a good group. It's a way to connect with other people. And we talk about these issues all the time. And we, like I said earlier, it's about sharing stories and learning from each other, because the human picture is incomplete without all of us. And also, one other thing to promote, since it's going to be available in the very near future, get this done. It's not just for yourself, it's for other people too.
Yep.
For sure.
Excellent. So for Steve and Jason, again, like anytime we can sit down and have these conversations, I think that's good. Like, not just for our benefit, but for the viewers out there, because these are a lot of topics that I don't think, to Steve's word, you know, folks are usually honest with each other about. Even if there's disagreements, I think there's a need for dialogue. So thank you both for your time, fellas.
And here, honestly, I'll just throw a shot across the bow of a lot of people out there. If people aren't talking about these things and they're too uncomfortable to engage in these, which are the most important and most interesting conversations, they're honestly not really worth talking to in the first place. Am I wrong?
Okay.
We're having fun, and we're talking about what actually matters, and we're having fun doing it. Right. So why refrain from doing something that stimulates your brain? If we're gonna just cultivate brain death, I don't want any part of that. I don't want any part of that.
Yes, exactly. So, and JK, I see you. JK's telling us to stop now because he's got the time.
Yes.
You're taking Melissa's job this week. All right, guys. Good talking with you.
All right.
Stop now. a social experiment enterprise. Stop, listen, share. Everyone can make a difference. We are on a mission. Everyone should do something greater in their lifetime. Change the future. Be a proud member. Join us to support, volunteer, and donate.